Hi, I'm Rachel, a digital content ambassador for Lancaster University. Today I'm going to talk about my study abroad experience in the second year of my fine art undergrad, and I studied in Bendigo, Australia. I set off for Australia at the beginning of July 2016, as Australian universities have 2 semesters. To break up the flight, I stayed a few days with my brother, who was living in Hong Kong at the time. Once I arrived at Melbourne Airport, I was met by a driver for the university who drove me and another girl to the campus. I ended up becoming very good friends with Kerry, a law student from Leicester, which is good as the drive ended up being 2 hours. We were much further from Melbourne than I expected. I did absolutely no research about Bendigo before I went, so I had no idea I was going to a country town in the middle of the bush. There were only 3 English exchange students at the Bendigo campus and 2 Swedish ones. We got interviewed for a local paper when we went, which was hilarious, as I referred to Kerry as a country woman. I went from being in a class of around 50 to around 8 people, but it was refreshing to focus on the Australian contemporary art scene, something that I hadn't looked at before, rather than just the Western one. I was lucky enough to have classes with Hannah, someone I already knew from Lancaster, from sharing a studio in our first year. I remember going to quite a few gallery trips around Melbourne, which was a lot of fun, and I based a lot of my work in Melbourne, which I think really developed my video skills. For the first semester, I lived on campus in a little bungalow, which backed onto the bushland, meaning I often saw kangaroos. There was a shortcut you could take to the art building through that bushland, and I remember just turning back and not going to class one day because a 7-foot kangaroo was just staring at me, blocking the middle of the path. I lived with 8 others and ended up making my friends through them. A lot of the students at the Bendigo campus studied outdoor education, which started my interest in outdoor sports. When I came back for my final year at Lancaster, I ended up joining the mountaineering club and kayaking from the stories my friends had told me of their experiences. The uni arranged weekend trips at the beginning of the term, which is a great way to make new friends and discover the country. I actually chose to buy a dodgy car off Gumtree, my beloved Saab 9-3, a granddad's car, which meant I was able to explore the area around Bendigo much better, which included swimming in waterfalls, going on hikes, and going to the nearby mountain range for walks. Having a car also meant I could join the Melbourne campus's surf club, which became a big part of my experience and got me absolutely hooked on this sport. I ended up joining the committee as a social media coordinator and thoroughly enjoyed getting to know the club and the sport. Those friends became friends for life. I actually went home for Christmas to see my friends and family again, but I came back to Australia in time for a New Year's festival. I remember lugging my suitcase for the next 18 months down dirt tracks in 40-degree heat. I had a really good time though. For the summer holiday, I drove with my friend up through the coast of Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland to do some exploring. We had to do it very cheaply, meaning a $30 camp tent, which was like a big sweaty plastic bag, and endless jam sandwiches, but it was an amazing experience and we saw so much and I have so many great memories from that month. Then the new term started again and I actually moved house as I found the campus accommodation quite expensive. I found out about the house through a friend of a friend and enjoyed getting to know new housemates. And I ended up finding a huntsman under my pillow. But these are not dangerous, but I was scared. I tried to do the whole put a glass on it thing, but it was actually so big I had to get a mixing bowl. I actually started to struggle again with rent because I got a car fine for parking facing the wrong way. Turns out this is illegal in Australia, but not in the UK. So that's a warning if you ever go to Australia. I didn't actually get the car fine till like 6 months later, as I had forgotten to tell Vic Roads that I had moved. So I received a letter at university saying I had a court date unless I came and paid the fine. This meant I lived in a bus in the garden for a month or so before moving down to Melbourne after classes finished, which was quite an experience. Overall, I had an incredible time on my study abroad. I definitely learned to become more independent, having to deal with situations myself rather than relying on friends and family, and I made some lifelong friends and saw beautiful places and learnt a whole brand new sport. I actually loved it so much that I intercalated for my next year and spent the next year getting work experience in a Melbourne gallery, and I moved in with my friends from the surf club. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and I hope you take the opportunity to study abroad if you can. It's something I'd really recommend.